Hi, I'm Peter Crossing. As part of the Art Sound contribution to the centenary of Canberra celebrations, it's my pleasure to bring you the first in a series of programs delving into rock and roll, the music phenomena that swept the world in the 50s and 60s. And who better to help provide insight into the rise of rock and roll in Canberra than two local Canberra stalwarts who were intimately involved at the time. It's my pleasure to welcome Val Starr and Peter Illich. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Pete.
Good to have you with us. Now, for the next hour or so, we're going to have a look at rock and roll, specifically in Canberra. Val, whereabouts did your interest in music begin in Canberra way back?
To the 1951 in the Cowra migrant camp, hearing all the ethnics, piano accordions, mouth organs or violins. And most of them inebriated, but all having a good time.
And Peter?
Probably a little bit later, and it was sort of after I'd heard groups like the Shadows playing, and then suddenly seeing some Canberra bands emerge, young Canberra bands like the Casuals, and that really piqued my interest until the Beatles came along and changed everything.
Changed everything in the early 60s, Absolutely. They did, yeah. Canberra from the mid-50s had rock and roll based on the Albert Hall and all the dance halls around the place. How did you, Val, become involved in that? How did your music develop over those years, those early years?
My father actually bought me an acoustic guitar when I lived in Queanbeyan, and he probably recognised some talents. And then guy, George Marchenko, who got me into the music, he had an acoustic guitar he used to loan me. And after that we moved to Canberra, and as Peter said, it came from Dwayne Eddy, Rebel Rouser, and then the Patchy by the Shadows. My whole world started with music.
From those instrumental bands?
From Hank Marvin, instrumental bands,
yeah.
That's right.
And Peter, what about you?
Same. It was really after I'd heard groups like the Shadows, I was intrigued by the guitar and convinced my parents to buy me a guitar. I tried to learn, I couldn't learn, didn't know how, and then suddenly I just picked it up and started playing, and that we had some television programs with Rosalind's TV show or something. They
That's
had
right, yeah.
Some local groups on like the Shadows, and I was absolutely blown away by them and wanted to emulate them, and so I started learning to play guitar.
Do you remember the Casuals on that Rosalind show? They had a weekly
absolutely. I used
weekly
to watch
show
it.
there.
Watch it. I loved it.
So this was on local television?
Yes, on CDC7 in those days.
Yep.
Yeah. It was really good. Yeah.
Okay, well let's get started with some of the music. And what's the first track that we're going to hear, Peter?
Well, probably the one that stands out, although they had lots of numbers, was a number by the Casuals called Moonshot.
Moonshot from the Casuals, is that right?
That's right.
Great track.
It's got a real sound of the Shadows there, hasn't it? That Hank Marvin ring to it.
Yeah, what made a lot of that sound actually was the old Klimt echo-let, a tape echo loop, to make the reverb and the delay repeats. Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that was the age of these guys.
Yes.
This was Bernie, the lead guitarist. He would have been about 14.
That's right.
14.
Yes.
And
14.
his brother 15. These were really young kids playing music, and they had it down pat. They were
Now,
great.
where would they have played this?
Well, that one was on the ABC radio, I think it
Yes,
was. But
right.
Methodist Youth Centre was a great spot where they played all these.
Is that the youth centre up here?
Yes,
at Forest?
exactly, just
Yes.
around the corner there.
Yeah.
One of the greatest places for our young cabaret pop bands.
Okay, what have you got for us next then?
There was actually a band called the Greg Lee Quartet back in 1965, and Venture Boogie.
Venture Boogie from the Greg Lee Quartet. Tell us about that, Val.
Well, as I said, the Greg Lee Quartet weren't all around that long, but the lead player in that track was actually John Strangeau, who became a very, very good bass player and still does play bass to this day.
Right.
But he wasn't all that old either, John, and just amazing his finger work in that song.
It was. Young blokes just picking up a guitar and away they go. Wonderful.
Well,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Next track, Peter.
Look, the next track's probably well, not probably. It is a song by a group called the Rising Suns. It's a Chuck Berry number called Memphis, Tennessee.
Help me information, get me Memphis, Tennessee. Help me find a party there who got in touch with me. We could not leave her number, but I know the place to call. The phone back to the message and he's rolling on the wall. Help me information, get in touch with my Marie. She's the only one that's for me from Memphis, Tennessee. Her home is on the south side, high on the red. Just a half a mile from the Mississippi Bridge. Help me information for the matter I cannot ask. Only that I miss her and all the fun we had. When we were through the party, was a rooming at her feet. Torn apart our happy home in Memphis, Tennessee.
Chuck Berry number, Memphis, Tennessee, from the Rising Suns, Canberra band from the 60s. You're on Art Sound 92.7, and we're talking the early days of rock and roll with Val Starr and Peter Illich. Val, where I met you was over your wonderful book that you've just released and sold many, many copies of. And it's now become a collector's item, I understand, with people offering you hundreds of dollars for the...
Well, that is a true story from last Friday. $100 I was offered for the book. The guy desperately wanted one, a guy from Sutton.
And the book is entitled Rock and Roll Comes to Canberra Next Thursday Night. Now, why the title and where did that come from?
Well, when I first wrote the book, I actually didn't have a title, and I wasn't quite sure what to call it. Then I remembered one of the press ads I got probably 5 or 7 years before that for the very first rock and roll dance in Canberra in October '56, which said rock and roll comes to Canberra next Thursday night. So what a better title to choose. And actually I rang the title over with Peter. Now, mind you, Peter Illich was my editor for the book. He made the book read like I could write.
Well, it's a wonderful book, and with all these anecdotes in it, and documented are all the bands, so many of the bands that were part of the rock and roll history over that period in Canberra, and you should be very proud of it. It's a fantastic book, I think, and it's a book that I've just picked up and thumbed through, and I'm learning more about all the time.
Oh.
Wonderful pictures, wonderful anecdotes.
Oh, thank you, Peter. It was
yeah.
a lot of years' work to it. It was a labour of love.
Yeah. Now, that Thursday night, where was that?
That was at the Albert Hall.
Right. And who was the group?
It was Bruce Lansley and the boys. Now, Bruce Lansley wasn't a rock and roll band, but he had the guts, I should say, to try out this new fad. And they even had a worry in the papers, an article asking whether there were going to be riots at the Albert Hall, because there were some riots among Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane at the time. But the newspaper report following the rock and roll dance was the police said the packed place was full, but they were a bit bored at the back there just listening to the music.
The next song, Peter, from that era.
Look, I think we've chosen the song called Canberra Blues by Bitter Lemons. This is a bit of an iconic song for Canberra. It was Paul Lynham, who was went on to become a fairly famous ABC reporter, and then worked in Parliament as part of the press corps there. They were one of the first bands that started local rock and roll dances in Canberra, and they put out a song called the Canberra Blues as part of, they were all ANU students at the time, and this was part of the Bush Week.
Come along, people, listen to me. Don't try to find a home downtown or ACT. It's a bourgeois town. I said it's a bourgeois town. Got the bourgeois blues, gonna spread the news all around. I got a little car, I'm on my lawn. I got high punches, so I'm gone. It's a bourgeois town. I said, Lord, it's a bourgeois town. Got the Canberra blues, gonna spread that news all around. But it's not still on Canberra, looking for some work. I thought I might be sold up. Then I found there was a big straight pub. I moved to Goulburn. Home of the brave, land of the free. Don't wanna be mistreated by the bourgeoisie. It's a bourgeois town. Well, it's a bourgeois town. Got the bourgeois blues, gonna spread bad news all around. Let's hear it, Nicky, let's hear it. Come on to Canberra, looking for some work. I thought I might be sold up. Then I found there was a big straight pub. I moved to Goulburn. I got a little car, I'm on my lawn. I got high purchase, so I'm gone. It's a bourgeois town. Well, it's a bourgeois town. I got the Canberra blues, gonna spread that news all around. I got the Canberra blues, gonna spread that news all around.
The Bitter Lemons with Canberra Blues. Now tell us, where did the Bitter Lemons play in Canberra?
Well, I actually had Paul Lynham open probably Canberra's very first disco venue called the Lemon Tree at the CWA Hall in Turner. It used to pack the place out, and a few of us, including one of Peter's bands and my band, the Castaways, actually did a gig there as well. But I'll just quickly tell you, the Bitter Lemons actually formed from two of members from my band, the Echoes. Nicky Yant and Martin Berry left the Echoes and formed up with Paul Lynham for the Bitter Lemons. And apparently they were called the Orgasms before the Bitter Lemons.
So the Bitter Lemons come afterwards. It sounds quite a professional recording. That one was done. It wasn't done in someone's backyard.
No. Well, as Peter said, it was done for Bush Week, and it was funded by the Bush Week. And I'm not sure what studio it was done in.
I think it was 2CA. It was recorded at 2CA Studios.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Part of this is the ANU Bush Week. Yeah.
And it wasn't really a studio. I mean, that was pretty primitive in those days.
And we're recording bands right back from the 50s.
Okay.
Especially some of the early Bruce Landleys and jazz bands.
Yep.
Even my band, The Echoes, did a recording there which we never ever heard.
That's right. In the book it says that you made the recording and never heard it afterwards at all.
Yeah. Well, that's like we did a TV appearance on that Rosalind television show as well, which we never recorded live. I don't think I would have wanted to see it, actually.
Now, both of you were in early bands, Echoes, and The Chosen Few. Yeah. And you just, as you mentioned a minute ago, you shared a couple of gigs together. Let's go to The Chosen Few. Tell us about The Chosen Few.
Well, Chosen Few was probably one of the first groups that we were all from Queanbeyan. Yes. Actually, everyone was from Canberra. We were actually from Queanbeyan, and we all... The groups in it, the people in it were sort of, we knew each other. I lived next to the drummer, and we knew the vocalist, and so we all sort of got together and started this group. And we were very much influenced by the Beatles, the Animals, all the early British beat groups. And the track that we'll be playing in a minute is a song that I actually wrote. Normally we do covers, but I'd try and writing a song, so I wrote this song called, as happens, very sort of Beatle influenced. Only 16 at the time, so it was good fun trying to emulate Lennon and McCartney. Never quite got there, unfortunately, but it was good fun anyway.
Well on the way. Now it's track 9 we're listening to, the next one?
Track 9.
Track 9. This is The Chosen Few, and The Sun Is Up.
The sun is up, but it don't shine for me. The sky is blue, but I'm still in misery. The rain falls down and it hides all my fears. The sun is up and it dries away my tears. The sun is up in the sky, but all I do is sit and cry. The wind blows cold on the love I once knew. The rain falls down like the tears I shed for you. The sun is up in the sky, but all I do is sit and cry. The days grow long as I sit by the phone. The sun is up, but I wait here all alone. The sun is up, but it don't shine for me. The sky is blue, but I'm still in misery.
The Sun Is Up, and what a wonderful song, Peter.
Oh yes, I was trying, as I said, trying to emulate Lennon and McCartney. Never quite got there, but it was good fun anyway.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant backing too.
Age?
Our average age at that time would have been about 16.
16, okay. And did you all dress in the manner...
We never had sort of staged, all the same unit, like I know
Yeah,
Val's band
yeah.
did. We
Yes.
didn't. We tended to dress in jeans, long hair, and all the mod
So
shirts,
you-
high boots, all that sort of
Right.
stuff.
So the long hair brigade in those days.
Oh yeah. I mean,
As a matter of fact, I think Peter's band were probably the very first band for every member to don the long hair look. There was a couple of guys in Canberra that had the long hair, but it was only the one or one and a half people in that band. But Peter's band, the Chosen Few, were probably the very first.
That had the long hair.
Yeah,
And did you have
yeah.
all the stage moves as well?
Oh, we did. We had
Yeah.
quite a wild stage act. And the thing, just going back to the long hair, the thing about that was that I was going to St Edmunds at the time,
Yes.
and I was in year 5, year 11 these days, and I was told you either get a haircut or you leave school. I didn't get a haircut, so I had to leave school, end up going to Queanbeyan High because they actually allowed you to have long hair there.
Longer hair
And,
than at Eddie's,
yeah.
right?
These days it doesn't matter, but in those days it was quite strict.
It was. I can remember our times in Adelaide. The same thing happened. We got pulled through the hoops for having marginally long hair,
Yeah.
which was. I mean, these days you're right. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, now from the Chosen Few, the Battle of the Bands. Tell us about the Hoadley's Battle of.
Well, we're talking about uniforms. The very first Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds in Canberra, or Australia-wide, was actually in 1966. There were battles prior to that, but the Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds started in 1966. In the Canberra event, there was Peter Illick's Chosen Few, my band, the Castaways, and Mick Skipper's band, the Roadrunners, were 3 out of 13 bands in the battle. Now, uniforms, I reckon we still looked the best for that battle. The Castaways had these, I think they were the red suits with the black collars, because we had the blue suits with black collars, but we got up there with our massive egos and we said, we're going to win this because we look so good. Well,
So you won the Battle of the Uniforms.
well, it wasn't even mentioned, but it was actually the Roadrunners that actually started walking out until they were announced that they won the battle. And Peter's Chosen Few, of course, were a great band in there as well.
And the Roadrunners actually did have uniforms. They quite often did wear uniforms.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing about the Battle of the Bands Sounds is mentioned in Val's book. The night before the Battle of the Sounds, several of those bands were all on the same bill at the Albert Hall at a dance that was being organised by Val. And the next day we all went up and played the Battle of the Sounds,
Battle of the
each
Sounds.
Yeah.
thinking we were going to win.
That was rather funny because it was like a subconscious mini battle at the Albert Hall, checking each other out, looking at each other and thinking, oh, no, they're no good, we're going to get this.
We're going to win it. Yeah. Well, let's hear from the Roadrunners. And they're the ones that eventually won the Battle of the Sounds.
They
the
won.
next day
They
after
won
this.
the first round and the second round. Then they went to Melbourne and unfortunately got thrashed because they came from a big fish in a little pool to a little fish in a big pool.
Yes,
But unfortunately, it was the band The Twilights that won that year.
which was a fair band.
Yeah, but
Excellent.
they weren't supposed to be there in the sense that they were already professional. It was supposed to
Okay.
be for amateurs originally.
Yes.
Yeah, the Roadrunners, and this was they got a recording contract as a result of winning the Battle of the Sounds, and this was the record that they recorded of that.
To what I say, everybody's got to have their day, and don't you know that everybody's got to love somebody sometime, but everybody can hope. Everybody's got to lose somebody sometime, so take care that you don't lose your heart. I once found love just like you, but then he may come to you, and don't you know that everybody's got to love somebody sometime, but everybody can't hope. Everybody's got to lose somebody sometime, so take care that you don't lose your heart. Take my advice and you will find you'll be happy all of the time. Take my advice and you will see you'll be happy as you can be. Listen, to have a day. And don't you know that everybody's got to love somebody sometime, but everybody can't. Oh, everybody's got to lose somebody sometime, so take care that you don't lose your heart. Don't lose your heart. Listen, people.
The Roadrunners with their winning Battle of the Sounds number, Listen People, which, not an original?
No, that was a number that was actually recorded by Herman's Hermits, and the Roadrunners record that as a result of winning the Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds as part of their recording contract.
Their contract,
I think it was the only record they made.
Okay, because the Twilights actually did, they did covers of the Velvelettes and other numbers, so they weren't doing all original stuff. But you two guys in your bands were.
More so Peter's band. My band was basically covers.
Right, okay.
We had a few originals, but unfortunately they were never on record. But I really don't know what happened to them.
I wouldn't say that we were an originals band. We tend to do more covers. We just, when we recorded some songs, we thought we'd record some original things, but mainly we were just a covers band as well.
Okay. But getting the sounds out around all the halls and the venues in Canberra in the 60s, those sounds of rock and roll. I'm talking to Val Starr and Peter Illich, and we're talking all about the early days of rock and roll in Canberra.
Well, Canberra also means Queanbeyan.
And Canberra, of course, means Queanbeyan. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes, because that's where Peter started. Yes, and some of the rehearsal places that you use. There was one in particular, an old place over in Queanbeyan.
Well, actually, it was actually in ACT. It was in Oaks.
In the Oaks Estate.
There was a hall
right
in Oaks Estate, and it was.
Sorry, that's ACT. I can't get that confused, can
that's
I?
That's right, it's the ACT, and that was a great rehearsal place because it was out of the way. There was no one would disturb you. There was a little old lady. What was her name?
Mrs. Corsini.
Mrs. Corsini.
I'll just quickly butt in there. Mrs. Corsini would tell you to have or whatever it was for the night in her letterbox. And
Right.
she was just a trusting lady. She would have been 100 in the shade in those days. And quite often you'd leave your money there and she was never there, but you'd also leave the key in the box or you'd knock on the door and get the key. Is that right, Peter, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And it was a great place because it was out of the way. If you couldn't get that hall, we'd end up practicing in your parents' garage.
Yes,
and
which would totally up neighbours.
Yeah, the neighbours would complain. Hence the notion of garage bands.
Yes.
We'd practice in the garages and you'd always attract a young group of females coming around saying, oh, yeah, there's bands practicing here.
Right.
Peter's talking about practicing at home. One of my bands, the Echoes, practiced in our bedroom, and our next door neighbour was actually a girl called Diane Marr, a very young Diane Marr, and she married Mick Skipper from the Roadrunners at last track you played.
Right.
Yes, but the Echoes also practiced in the linen room of the Hotel Wellington because we knew the owner, the son of the owner in those days. That was in Forest, which is now ripped down. I don't know what it's called. You know, Peter?
I don't know.
It was right in the corner, not far from the Methodist Youth Centre, just around the corner.
In Forest, okay.
Yeah, in Forest.
Now, protest era was in the mid-60s with Dylan, etc., etc. Can we talk about that for a moment?
Well, there's an interesting song that we're about to play by a group called the Night Beats. It's a song written by Robert Beattie. It was actually a protest song.
And Robert actually works here too.
He does. He is heard on the radio.
I didn't realise he did.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
There you go, Robert.
And he's hides his candle under a bushel because I'm finding out things about Robert that I didn't know before. Yeah. So the Night Beats, and the track was
called What's in a Name.
What's in a Name.
Walk down the street any time of the day. Many people you'll meet as you move on your way. And then you might notice someone with dark skin. Look for a minute and walk on past him. And as you remember his face in your mind, you'll begin to wonder and wonder what kind. Does he live in China, Vietnam or Hong Kong? Maybe it's Java where he's from. He wasn't too tall and he had that black hair. But really no, that's no reason to stare. He's just like ourselves, he's exactly the same. And no one should mind about his country's name. I say, hey, 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 what's in a name? Hey, hey, what's in a name? Hey, hey, we're all the same. haven't a care. They're not concerned, they're willing to share. A friend is made easily, no matter his race. Children don't mind who has a black face. The password is laughter, no other sound. You can look for a sad child, but none can be found. Their lives will be happy until they are taught all about the wars and the battles been fought. And soon after this they will start to forget their friends from Egypt, France and Tibet. But why say goodbye? For there is no shame, and no one should mind about his country's name. I say, hey, 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 what's in a name? Hey, hey, what's in a name? Hey, hey, we're all the same. So what's in a name? The color of skin, the shape of the eyes, these differences people should never despise. We were created by God up above, never to hate, only to love. So why can't we live together as friends instead of bringing this world to an end? The only link among nations, it seems, is found in our prayers to answer our dreams. In Poland, Australia, Spain and Japan, Gambia, Germany, Russia, Thailand, from the ends of the world, the cry is the same. What does it matter about any name? I say, hey, 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 what's in a name? Hey, hey, what's in a name?
The night beats there.
We're all the same. So what's in a name? Hey, hey, what's in a name?
Okay, from the night beats, who
Well-
were mid-60s, Val.
If I could just go back well before the mid-60s, Peter, how our rock and roll scene developed with
Yes.
our very first pop band, The Planets, which I mentioned in my book. They were actually became a band called the Corvettes, and the Corvettes held many dance at the Police Boys Club, and they were rock and roll, music and stuff like that. At the same time, you had a band called the Alpines, almost neck and neck with the Corvettes, but the Alpines originally were a country and western band, and they got onto the rock and roll and pop scene too. And then they split up. The Corvette split called the Invaders in '61 with George Lazenby in the band. There's a track here of the Deans called Have a Nagila.
Peter.
Well, moving on from 1962 back to about 1967, saw, I think, one of the sort of what I would call one of the first super groups in Canberra, a band called St James Infirmary. They were doing a lot of numbers by groups like Small Faces and a lot of the British beat groups, but they were very, very accomplished. They went to Sydney, they got a lot of rave reviews there, they had a big following. Unfortunately, like a lot of groups, they sort of self-destructed after a while and
Yes.
came back and formed other groups.
St James Infirmary.
With it, take it to the heart of mine. When I see a doctor who do go
in the morning there.
There we go. The St James Infirmary, Take This Heart of Mine. Peter, and you were saying they're quite accomplished band.
Yeah, they were, as I said, I think they were one of Canberra's first super groups. And the interesting thing about the group is that it featured a guy called Peter DeVries, who's actually a quite famous cinematographer and actually does a lot of work for the ABC.
You're on Artsound 92.7, 90.3 in the Tuggeranong Valley and streaming on artsound.fm. Peter Crossing with you, and I'm talking to Val Starr and Peter Illick about the early days of rock and roll in Canberra. Okay, gentlemen, where do we go next?
If I could just mention a band, probably back in the late 60s, we can step back a bit later, was a band called The Good Vibrations.
Yes.
And why I mention it, one of my best mates even to this day, Bilakova, he was a lead player in that band, but I've always fascinated with their harmonies and the songs they did. And they used to pack out the Starcrest Lounge in Civic, which was a great hangout for a lot of bands, but they actually had a 3-night-a-week gig there for a couple of years, and I'd love to play the song of theirs.
Okay. Now, what track are we after, Val?
It's a track by the Small Faces called People Gotta Be Free.
Good Vibrations there with People Got to Be Free. Now, Val, tell us some more about some of the venues and discos around Canberra at that time.
Well, after the Lemon Tree, there was a few little minor discos sprung up, but in September '66 there was a disco called Chapter 1 in Civic downstairs. It was East Row, wasn't it, Peter?
Yes, East
yes.
Row.
And
East Row,
it was opened by Mr. and Mrs. Hewson. Sadly, they've both passed away now. But there were some absolutely great bands came into that era and playing at the discos. Now, just quickly, I'll tell you, my band, the Castaways, did one gig there and we completely bombed out.
Right.
We had our blue suits on, of course, and but we weren't...
You won the best suits again, though.
I think we were more cabaret by that stage.
Yes.
Where bands like even Peter's band, The Chosen Few, and lots of other great bands. Peter, what were some of the good bands that played there?
Well, certainly one of the resident bands, there was a band called with a strange name called the Fairyland Teeny Boppers.
Okay.
They were, again, probably one of Canberra's super groups along with St James Infirmary. And they had this absolutely wonderful singer called Lee Tafe, who sadly has passed away now. He was a gifted musician. He could play anything, organ, guitar. He had the most wonderful voice. And here's actually a live track of the Fairyland Teeny Boppers at Chapter 1 playing A Whiter Shade of Pale.
We'll leave the miller telling his tale there from the Fairyland Teeny Boppers and Whiter Shade of Pale. From a live recording from the Chapter 1, which was in East Row in Civic. Now, tell us a bit more about Chapter 1, Peter.
Oh, Chapter 1 was it was a wonderful place for young kids because it was almost like a grown-up place for teenagers to go, and you'd meet all your friends, everyone would be there. And a bit later on, I know that I used to have bands that used to practice there. They used to rent out the place for practice as well. So we'd rent out the place, we'd go to practice there. But because it was set up like a restaurant, had ice cream bars and everything, we'd always, during our rehearsals, raid the ice cream bar and eat all the ice creams. And I don't think we ever got found out, so we probably owe Mrs. Hewson quite a lot of money for all the ice cream we ate.
It's just quickly, Peter. One of the Houston girls actually rang me up just before Christmas and found out about my rock and roll book, and ordered a copy. And she actually reported back and was so pleased that her parents' chapter 1 was mentioned in the book.
Yeah. Did she mention ice creams?
No. I didn't reveal anything there.
Okay, where do we go from here?
Just quickly, there was actually, we played a track by the Rising Suns previously. From the Rising Suns, Scotty and Andy Ingram became a band called the Brothers Grimm, and they had a record out. Peter, what was the name of that record?
The record, their first record out, they had a couple. Was a number called Beautiful Delilah, and it was another Chuck Berry number. They'd also recorded, the flip side was an original by their manager. But the band actually had, I think it was the first Canberra band that actually had a proper recording contract and had a record released all over Australia. And that was this song called Beautiful Delilah.
Yeah. It was actually EMI contract, but once again, I think alter egos kicked in and the bands broke up.
Right, so Brothers Grimm with Beautiful Delilah. Brothers Grimm, who gained a national recording contract, and that was their hit, their song Beautiful Delilah. Now, where do we go next, gentlemen?
Well, actually, I'd like to mention a band called the Second Movement, who were originally called the Diplomats back in 1968. Now, the interesting about this band is, for a start, is their names. We had Richard Wozniewski, Zeus Hebda, Wally Kalesa, Pat Italiano, Morris Avellino, and of course the odd one out was Arthur Lang. All the other guys were ethnics.
Yes.
I think they should have been called the Internationals.
Yes.
But they had a gig at the Deacon Inn for many, many years. They had that place packed all the time, running beautiful dances, and well into the 70s later with Xanadu Disco and things like that. But they also had some terrific songs they wrote. Now, just quickly before Peter gets onto the songs, the Second Movement reformed as a joke back in about 1998, just for some friends, and they just took off like a bomb. And they're still playing to this day, only doing probably half a dozen to a dozen gigs a year, but getting the good selective work, and they are a great band.
So they're a good band to see around Canberra, yes?
And Arthur, I think sings better now than he did back in the 60s, actually. Yeah.
And so they wouldn't be appearing at... The Deacon Inn was on Kent Street, wasn't it?
Yes, unfortunately it's ripped down.
It's gone, yeah. So Second Movement is a band that we can still look out for in Canberra that's lasted the distance.
They have,
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Peter, what about their music?
Well, the Second Movement were another group like the Brothers Grimm that got an Australia-wide recording contract, and they put out a couple of singles and recorded an album. The album was never released, but all the tracks for the singles and the album were written by Arthur Lang, who was actually a very underrated songwriter.
Yes.
He was very, very good at writing songs. He had a great voice, great ear for melody. And this song is a number that actually did make the charts in Canberra. I'm not sure how well it did Australia-wide, but it's a number called The Big Top.
The Big Top from Second Movement.
All the people stand and stare, all the gaiety of the fair. See the clown, a funny chap, for his tricks he gets a clap. See the man on the flying trapeze, flying through the air with ease, somersaulting to and fro, one of the highlights of the show. It's the life of a big top baby that I know. It's the life you gotta love and gotta know. It's the life of sweat and heartache. It's the life you never make or break. The fat lady, her name's Denise, gives the man a jolly squeeze. She's all of 37 stone, the biggest girl I've ever known. The ringmaster, a bearded man, directing from the ring he stands. 6'2" in coat of red, strung big hat upon his head. It's the life of the big top baby that I know. It's the life you gotta love and gotta know. It's the life of sweat and heartache. It's the life you either make or break. The big top opens the crowd at once. The peanut shells, the old train off. The empty seats all in a row depicts the ending of the show.
Second Movement there with The Big Top.
Look, I'd just like to go back a bit again, Peter, to a band called the Night Beats. Once again with Robert Beattie from your station.
It's another Robert Beattie original, a number called Gwenda.
Gwenda, that's the name of my girl, and the prettiest name in the world. Oh, G-W-E-N-D-I-A. G means you're good looking, everybody knows it too. W means you're wonderful, that's the word for you. E means you're everything every boy could ever want. M means you'll never be blue, not when I'm around. D, don't you worry, my darling, you're the only girl for me. A, I'll always adore you,
Gwenda. Tell us about Gwenda.
Well, I don't know who Gwenda was, but I'm sure Robert Beattie does, and he'll be able to tell you lots more about her.
Val and Peter, thank you so much for coming in today to talk about the early days of rock and roll in Canberra. I hope we can do this again and get into a bit of the 70s music and beyond, but thank you so much, and I've thoroughly enjoyed reading your wonderful book and in hearing the anecdotes today. So we'll go out with the chosen few.
Track's called Rainin' in My Heart. This isn't an original. It's a number recorded by the Pretty Things, but it was a band that we really enjoyed playing their numbers. So it's a number called Rainin' in My Heart by the Chosen Few.
The Chosen Few. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Peter.
Rain in my heart since we've been apart. I know I was wrong.
And there we leave part one of the history of rock and roll in Canberra.